I bought my Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch Professional less than a year ago, and now the MoonSwatch came out, so do I regret it? I don't know. Maybe. I bought my Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch Professional last year in July, so less than a year ago. And now, something that looks pretty close is out, and for a fraction of the price. So, do I regret having bought my Moonwatch? That's a complicated question. First, the specifications, and most people know what they are. It's 42 millimeters wide, 47 millimeters lug to lug. It's 13 millimeters thick, 20 millimeter lug width. It weighs in at 130 grams with the bracelet on. Has a water resistance of 50 meters, which Omega says I can swim with, but I haven't tried it yet. I have to say, on my 6 3/4 inch wrist, it wears beautifully. It hugs my wrist in a way that I hadn't expected of a 42 millimeter watch. My other watch I wear a lot is 36 millimeters, my Explorer. Up until then, I had sworn off anything over 40 millimeters, and then I went and bought this. And it wore way better than I had expected. When I was there, I tried on a vintage model, and I tried on the old reference number. In fact, I bought the vintage first, traded it in, and then bought this one the same day. And for me, the reason why I made the jump was I hadn't gotten comfortable with vintage. Vintage isn't my thing. I wear modern watches, it makes me comfortable. I know in my field of construction I can wear it, I can abuse it. I could toss it across the room within reason, and it would be fine. That leads into the movement. The original base plate for the movement has remained almost completely unchanged since the original 321 caliber movement that goes back to the 1930s, and before that from original chronograph constructions. The 321 remained in the Speedmaster for a long while until they moved to a cam actuated chronograph because, quite frankly, they could manufacture it more and replace the parts more easily. They could create them in larger numbers and not have to worry about the wear and tear that a column wheel goes through. From the 1863, it then changed into 3861, but the base requirements are still there. All the tests that they went through with NASA have supposedly been redone on all the Moonwatches from the 1960s to now. And what I like is thinking about those tests and all the other watches that failed at the time before the Omega passed. So what's different about this movement? The 3861 is a coaxial version of the 1863, and it's passed METAS certification, which with its silicon hairspring is easier. Silicon is an anti-magnetic metal, so instead of using a magnetized metal, you use an anti-magnetic metal, and now you have a movement that can be next to a magnet, a very strong magnet, and be perfectly fine. You can even go online and find your watch and the tests it went through and exactly how well it passed. It comes with your booklet when you buy a Speedmaster now, at least this version of it, which I found interesting for a couple days, and then I forgot that it was part of it. The main reason why I was drawn to the Speedmaster when I was purchasing my next watch was its versatility. I was considering 3 watches at the time, an Omega Speedmaster Professional, a Breitling Navitimer, and a Santos de Cartier. The last one did not really fit with my lifestyle, but I imagined myself wearing a Santos de Cartier with the polished bezel. But as soon as I put it on, I looked at it and I thought about me handling an impact driver or, trying to pick up a trim board to load it on a truck, and I thought, that thing is going to get scratched up. The versatility of the Speedmaster won out. I can wear it in more situations with it going unnoticed than the busy dial of the Navitimer. And that's where I made my decision. The other piece of the Speedmaster that I've always loved is the design. For me, when I look down at my Speedy, I see the 60s. I see Neil Armstrong driving in a Corvette the day before he's launched in a rocket to the moon. Of course, the astronauts were given Corvettes at the time, and so, of course, that's why I imagine it. And I imagine a little bit of that in the cool factor of the watch. It doesn't make me feel cool, but it's in there somewhere. The version of me that wears a Speedy is a guy that could drive a Corvette or could go into a rocket. This watch will never go to space, just like I will never go to space, but when I look at it, I think it's got a bit of that piece. The version of me that wears this would go into space. For me, I had a rocky road with the Speedy. My history with Speedmasters was that I had owned a Speedy Reduced. I had loved it. It fit into my lifestyle and the size was perfect for my wrist, or so I imagined at the time. I thought, if this is a perfect fit, the Speedmaster Professional will be too big. I don't like 42mm watches. And something about the Reduced just didn't click. When I looked down on it, I thought I saw a nice watch, a very cool watch, but not the watch that I wanted. And I don't know if it was the different subdials, how they pushed out into the markers, or the fact that it had the numbers. No one thing stood out to me as the reason why I didn't keep it, but I didn't. At the time, I was actually lusting after an Explorer 1, and I sold it to help fund the Explorer 1, and maybe that factored into the sale. But either way, I parted with it, and I then started thinking about the Speedmaster Professional again, from then forward. And it took me a year and a half before I ended up getting the Speedy Professional. My reaction with the Speedy was a bit rough to start. I hadn't bought a watch new, I'd only bought pre-owned, and so when you buy pre-owned, it's got maybe a couple scratches, and it helps you ease into the watch a little, or at least for me it does. When I bought this, it was brand new. There were no scratches. When I put it on, I saw something that was already immaculate. And so I thought every scratch I put into it, I'm lowering the value, and I don't even know if I want to keep it. Why didn't I want to keep it? Because when I looked down on it, I saw something that I had spent more money on than my Explorer, that I had loved. And I still love. With the Explorer, I had polished indices. I had a totally different feel. And so when I put this on and I saw its matte dial and painted indices, I didn't see the same amount of money. And I know that that's not how I'm supposed to see it, but when you're spending that much money, you see, is it worth that much? Or could I get this other thing? And I struggled with that for a while. I also thought about the sharpness of the clasp and the sharpness of the case. Now, I won't say that it's abrasive or aggressively sharp. It's not. But it's noticeable. When I put on the clasp, I feel a little bit of that sharpness of the clasp on my thumb as I'm putting it on. And just like when your head hurts and you think about your head hurting, it doesn't go away. It's the same thing. Every time I put it on, I felt that clasp and I thought the same thing. And that, for me, was part of the reason why I didn't enjoy it. So what changed? Why do I still own it? I bought a strap. I bought a Tropic strap, and it was supposed to be for my Seiko SPB 143. But as soon as I put that Tropic strap on the Speedy, it felt like it was at home. It no longer slipped around on my wrist. It stayed put. It vanished. I didn't even notice it was there. The wearability, the thought of it being too big, was eliminated. And the black strap set off the watch in such a way that I noticed details that I hadn't seen in the amount of steel that was there with the bracelet. Like it washed away with the bracelet. When I had the strap, I noticed the lyre lugs. I noticed the shimmer of the steel on the outside of the bezel. I noticed things I hadn't noticed before. And it became more practical. It seemed less noticeable. It became the watch that I thought I could slip on and no one would ask, or look at it, or think that I spent too much on a watch. And for me, that's what watches have always been about, an enjoyment for me. And in my line of work, I don't want anyone to know what I'm wearing. So, if I had the MoonSwatch option back when I bought the Moonwatch, would I have gotten it instead? Would I have not bought the Speedy Pro? That's complicated. Maybe. Maybe I would have bought the MoonSwatch, and I would have waited. Now for me, the Mission to Mercury is the one that I think looks the most ideal. It's almost like a PVD or almost PVD version of the Moonwatch. And that's the kind of watch I'd like to wear. That's the kind of watch I'd like to enjoy as an almost beater. It's still a little expensive, but it could do some of those things. If I had bought the MoonSwatch, I think I would have felt the same way I did with the Speedy Reduced. I would have thought of wearing something else. I would have thought the subdials don't quite sit in the spot I want. It doesn't have quite the look that I'm after. It doesn't feel, for me, like Neil Armstrong in a Corvette. So, if I had gotten the MoonSwatch, I think I would have come back to the Speedy Pro. It could have been 5 years or 10 years later, but I think in the end, and especially now, I'm always going to own a Moonwatch or Speedmaster Professional. I'll own a MoonSwatch as well. I'm happy to buy one, but this isn't going anywhere.